As he was placing the head of the anaesthetized patient onto the frame, the head slipped and his eye landed on the spike, perforating the eyeball. Panicking and thinking that his career was now over, he then, rather bizarrely, started poking at the eyeball, trying to work out what was wrong until the anaesthetist told him to stop. They then called the ophthalmologist, who came to tidy up what was now a completely ruined eye. After the surgery, terrified, he went to explain to the patient what had happened. Understandably fearing the worst, anger, distress and tears, he received the response of, "That's okay, I was blind in that eye anyway." That's how the story ended. Talk about a lucky day. I still don't think the hospital's management would have been too pleased with that though. Coming at number 8 now, we have The Choice. This is a very unique story on our list because the trauma doesn't really come from the actual surgery, but from a grave choice that had to be made. The Redditor said, "This isn't my story, but my father is a surgeon. He was on call one night when 2 people were brought into the ER on stretchers. One was a cop and one was a criminal. They had both been in a gunfight and had both been shot. At the time, the hospital was a small one, and my father was the only surgeon on call capable of performing the operation. Essentially, both were going to die if he didn't intervene. He only had time to save one. Of course, he chose the cop, and he was able to save his life, much to the appreciation of the other officers at the hospital, but the criminal died shortly after. He tells me that he never regretted that decision and that he would have made the same choice 1,000 times over, but dealing with the repercussions of the decision was difficult for him regardless. Just a sobering moment when he was a new surgeon that stuck with him for a long time." That story really hit me because, yeah, I think most people would agree with that choice, but like the storyteller said, being put in that situation can stay with you possibly forever. Moving on to number 7 now, we have The Shortcut. This story is a reminder that if surgery is worth doing, it's worth doing properly. Reddit user The Bold Man Laughs Once said, "My story is extremely rare, as I was the patient but awake for the surgery. I was supposed to have a bump on my back removed. Nothing huge, just a lump of some kind. For insurance reasons, they did it as an ambulatory in the OR of a hospital instead of the surgeon's actual office. So I'm wide awake, face down in the OR. I had picked him as my surgeon because his main practice was plastic surgery. At the time, I lifted a lot of weight and spent a lot of time working my back. I wanted as small a scar as possible. I was vain. He begins with the first incision, then goes for a second larger one, then goes deeper and realizes the bump is just the extruding tip of a cyst that cut through my back to the back of my lungs. He wasn't used to operating on alert patients. As soon as he realizes, he just says, 'Oh That was the beginning of a 4-hour surgery for which I was awake. What they cut out of me was the size of an adult fist. In closing the wound, they drew in so much flesh that my right arm became essentially inflexible. I couldn't lift weights for years. All that precious work shot down the drain. What an I was." Next up at number 6 now, we have The Flashback. This is one that, if it happened to me, I would never forget it my whole life. It's a reminder of just how powerful the human brain can be and how some things leave wounds deeper than any surgical scar. Reddit user Blow the Candles Out said, "I worked as a surgical assistant for an oral and maxillofacial surgeon. I saw so many things, but the one that stands out the most was when we were just about to start on a huge guy. He was like 6'3" and weighed around 250 pounds, extremely fit, buff guy. During the beginning of the procedure, the guy immediately woke up and went insane. He had a PTSD episode. He started pushing, kicking, punching, screaming, 'I have to help them. I have to help my men escape. I can't leave them behind. He's been shot. They killed them.' He was sobbing. There were more than 5 of us that were in the room, and we could barely hold him down before the doctor could finally administer any type of sedative. Turns out what he was screaming had actually happened to him. It still gives me goosebumps. I remember it like it was yesterday. We ended up rescheduling his surgery." Moving on to number 5 now, we have The Couch. This one doesn't actually involve a surgery. Instead, it's about someone who was in such a bad state that surgery would only have made things worse. You'll see. It came from a Reddit user who said this story is from their brother, who is an EMT. They said the patient is an obese male in excess of 500 pounds. Unable to lift himself from the couch, he had been in that state for several weeks. When they attempted to remove him from the couch, a massive chunk of flesh began to peel away from his body, exposing his muscles and his vertebrae. The patient loses consciousness. Unable to remove the man from the couch without killing him, they attempt to keep him alive while he is attached to the couch. The fire department is called. They can cut the couch away and hopefully get him into the hospital intact. Fast forward to the ER, the surgeon concluded that there was no way to remove him from the couch and save his life. Attempting to remove the couch would expose so much of his body to the outside that if he could survive the surgery, he would not survive the infections to follow. And that's how that story ended, right there. I know what you're thinking. What happened next? I don't really know, I'm afraid, but some people have assumed the worst. Moving on to number 4 now, we have the insect drive. They say that you should always trust your nose, and amazingly, this can even apply to surgery, although I'm sure the surgeons never wanted this to happen. This story comes from Reddit user Prof Bobo, who said, "I was rounding a few months back and a guy gets wheeled into the ICU smelling terrible. I walked over and the dude had maybe the most macerated legs I have ever seen. There were things moving on the bed and the suction container was full of maggots. Turns out the dude had been weaving on the road, and when police pulled him over and opened the doors, maggots just fell out onto the road. He got taken to the ER, arrested, taken up to the ICU and very rapidly debrided, then bilateral above knee amputated. He actually made it out of the hospital, but I cannot imagine waking up one day and having no legs. I really wish I knew where he was driving though." Next up at number 3 now, we have suntan. This one comes from a Reddit user who actually deleted their account at some point. Hopefully it wasn't because of this story. They said way back in the day, pre-op was guy with a light sheen of cleaning fluid on him and static electric spark equaled fully engulfed flames. Everyone just stood there for a second till someone grabbed a sheet and put out the flames. The surgery went well, no complications, but a slight suntan. Now I know that story seemed quite casual, but let's just think about that for a moment. This patient was unconscious on the surgery table and then they caught fire when the cleaning fluid ignited. I wonder if they woke up. I wonder if they were okay afterwards. I wonder if they ever found out what happened to them. I have a whole bunch of questions with that one. Moving on to number 2 now, we have the scalpel. The whole surgery thing only really works because of anesthetics. Can you imagine what it would be like to have surgery while feeling everything that was happening on you? Well, this one might give you an idea. It came from Reddit user The Stone Donkey, who said, "Had a friend with a swollen area on his lower back where it got to the point where he could barely sit. So he goes to his family doctor. The doc says, yeah, that's a pilonidal cyst. We should probably go ahead and take care of that. He told my friend to take off his shirt and lay flat on his stomach. So he's laying there and waiting, and the doctor says you're going to feel a poke, and is at this point expecting a local. Well, first it turns out the poke was actually a scalpel, not a local. He says it basically felt like someone took a fire hot poker and drove it into his back. He then hears the doctor exclaim, "Oh boy, we have a pumper," just as he feels warm blood and pus now pouring all over his back. The nurse's face, which was the only thing he could see, went from a warm smile to what he termed as pure and unadulterated fear, and the doctor is screaming for her to get a gauze and towels. The doctor climbed up and laid on his back to apply pressure for about 10 minutes until finally the bleeding stopped. And finally, number 1 now, we have terrible timing. Now for this one, I want you guys to think about that one time you needed to go to the toilet so badly you thought you were going to burst, but you just couldn't go to the bathroom for whatever reason. Is it worse than this story? I'm going to guess no. This one came from Reddit user Suckits27, who said, "This really happened to me when I was trained to be a cardiologist. I was in my 2nd or 3rd heart procedure, catheterization, when my senior doctor got sick, ripped off his surgical gown and ran out of the room. The doctor just yelled, 'Oh no,' and left. I had just positioned these catheters with wires into the sleeping patient's heart. They were just hanging out there, pulsating to his heartbeat. Apparently, the doctor had gotten food poisoning and made a run for the bathroom, never to return. So I've never made it to this point in the procedure before, and I'm just wondering where to take it from here. I haven't even been taught how to take them out safely. I'm looking at the vitals and the monitors like, what do I do now?' Of course, they paged my senior cardiology fellow in training, who is taking a nap and not returning any pages or calls. No other doctors around. Finally, thank God, my tech assistant, who has done these procedures since before I was born, gives me a nudge to flush the catheters, which I do to prevent blood clots and death, essentially. And after a few minutes properly removes the catheters and wires. That story, wow. I feel bad for the surgeon, I feel bad for the storyteller who had to step up and finish the surgery, but I really feel bad for the patient there. I wonder if they knew that their surgeon spent the whole end part of the surgery sitting on the toilet. And that brings us to the end of the video. As with every story video I do, it's time for me to hand over to you now. Have you ever experienced or heard any crazy surgery stories? Let me know. Thanks for watching. As always guys, my name is Danny Burke and I'll see you all in the next one. So, the first parallel universe video that I did went really well. There's just something about parallel universes that you guys seem to really enjoy. Even if you don't believe they exist or that we can't pass between them, these stories from real people on Reddit are fascinating to hear and of course pretty creepy indeed. Here's some more amazing ones for you today. My name is Danny Burke and this is the top 10 scary parallel universe stories part 2. Starting off at number 10 now, we have The Being. We're starting off with a great one here. This Reddit user said a lot of this story takes place a couple of years ago. However, the final part happened just a couple of nights ago, so I figured I should post it. This all sort of started 2 years ago. I was walking my puppy down to the beach after dinner. She splashed around in the water a bit, not very important to this story. What is important is when I was walking her back to my house. There was a man with the biggest smile on his face just walking down the sidewalk with over-exaggerated arm movements. As we passed, he politely said good evening to me. A couple of months later, I was in the car with my mom and sister. That same man was walking down the sidewalk and my sister pointed out his odd arm motion. Almost immediately, my mom told her to not make fun of him and that is just something he does. She then quickly said she's known him for a while. A couple of weeks ago, I was out jogging at night. Since it was late, I was very paranoid when I was out, so I was looking all around the whole time. For a couple of minutes, I was just staring ahead. There was no way I could have missed anything. Who else showed up? Almost out of thin air, that same exact man. There was something noticeably different. Everything about him had reversed. The once overjoyed man had an almost cartoonishly huge frown and was walking a single thing, which seemed odd just for politeness sake. I got home and immediately told both of my parents about the encounter. While attempting to explain the whole thing to my parents, my mom looked incredibly confused. She told me she had no idea who the man was, even after I reminded her about the car ride where he showed up. Finally, 2 days ago, I saw the man again. He was on the other side of the street from me. There was absolutely nowhere for him to go. But when I turned around, he was nowhere to be seen. This whole thing has me incredibly freaked out. I haven't even been jogging since the incident. I can't even explain the feeling I had the last 2 times I saw him. I just know I've never felt more disturbed in my life and I have no idea why. Both times seeing the man at night, I felt shaken to my very core. If anyone has any theories, I would love to hear them. Next up at number 9 now, we have the husband glitch. They say that people and places can phase between parallel worlds, but can text messages. This story comes from Reddit user Aunt Masto, who said, I'm a newlywed. We'd been married less than a month when I woke up at 5:30 AM next to my husband's sleeping form and saw a notification on my phone. It was a text from him, Sam, with a love heart sent at midnight. Sam said, who is this? Now, I'm pretty sure that Sam was stretched out next to me, snoring away at midnight. I'm a light sleeper, and it's likely I would have woken if he hadn't got out of bed or turned on his phone. Still, stranger things have happened. I figured he was playing a weird joke on me or something. I decided to play along, so I wrote back, who is this? Seconds later, Sam replied, I asked you first. I could feel Sam pressed against my right side, warm and breathing regularly. I looked at his nightstand and confirmed his phone was still there, dark and silent. I said, seriously, who is this? Why are you coming up on my phone under one of my contacts' names? Sam said, what name am I under? I said, obviously there's some cross wires here somewhere. We don't know each other. Sam said, are you in? And it was the name of the the town that we both lived in? I said, yes. Are you? He said, yes. I said, okay, there you go. Wires are crossed. It's weird, but I'm sure it happens. He said, we must live near each other. What street are you on? I tried to change the subject because I definitely did not want to tell this person the street that I was on. I asked him, do I come up on your phone under someone else's name? Sam said, I was looking through my contacts and I saw one that I didn't remember, created under the name Wi-Fi with a heart like this next to it. I was just curious who this was. I live on Violet Street, by the way. I went cold. My husband's nickname for me is Wi-Fi, but pronounced Wi-Fi. It's a silly inside joke. No one knows about it but us. Or so I had thought. And we do live on Violet Street, and we both make little love hearts next to each other's names. And something about this person's writing style was so familiar. I confirmed that my husband was still slumbering next to me. His phone was still on the nightstand. Someone was messing with me. I turned my phone off, got up and got ready for work. Later that morning, I showed the text to Sam, who was baffled. His phone had no messages on it. He texted me to test things out, and his message hi popped up right underneath the last message the other Sam had sent to me. That one weirds me out. Give me your theories, guys, please. Moving on to number 8 now, we have the closet. Have you guys ever seen someone that looks a lot like you? You probably think nothing of it, but sometimes it makes people really question their own reality. Reddit user Please Probe Me, nice name, said, I used to work at a dog rescue in the Midwest before moving home to the East Coast. It was a small rescue, about 10 employees max, and we were all tightly knit. Nobody there resembled me. I am exceptionally short and have different hair than anyone there. So it wasn't easy to mistake someone else for me or vice versa. The place was also haunted. We all heard a female voice yelling at us or singing near us when we were completely alone. Almost everyone saw apparitions or reflections when nobody was there. So this place was already full of some weird energy to begin with. Then it got weirder. During my last couple of months, co-workers started sending me odd texts. They would text me on my days off asking me why I was there and where I had just disappeared to. I would always reply that I wasn't there. While I was there, occasionally someone would jump at the sight of me and say something like, what the hell, you were just outside, I saw you through the window, or I just saw you in the storage room, how did you get here so fast? They couldn't understand how I gotten from point A to point B impossibly fast. Every time I would be baffled and explain that I wasn't where they thought I was before. A good example that I remember was this one. I was in the backyard. The only door in from there goes through the main adoption room, then exits on the other end about 50 feet away into a hallway containing a kitchen and some private meeting rooms. I walked in from outside and saw my co-worker coming into the room from the hallway. She looked at me and gasped. Then she opened the door behind her to the hallway. She explained that she had just seen me in the kitchen doing dishes, but when she opened the door, which lay about 6 feet beyond the kitchen door, there I was coming in from the outside. It was actually impossible. This is where we started to understand that something very strange was going on. We all sat around and talked about it, and it turned out almost everyone was seeing a phantom version of me. Every time they saw it, it was turned around and didn't interact with them. It would get into some strange places too. For example, someone watched me go into the closet holding the water tank and followed me, asking me some questions about work matters. As soon as they turned into the closet, I was gone. Now, I personally hadn't walked into that closet at all around that time, let alone on that day. My best guess is that I was in the middle of making a major life decision about either staying in this city at this job and taking a promotion or coming back to the East Coast. The decision was extremely stressful for me to make as I really loved that job. I'm surmising that my energy literally just split somehow and that a parallel version of me was hanging around there after I endured so much angst over staying or leaving. If I want to get super weird about it, I could say that maybe in another reality I decided to stay there, and maybe those two timelines were intersecting and glitching onto one another. They continued to see me after I moved home thousands of miles away. Moving on to number 7 now, we have the wise dog. They say that animals have a sixth sense. Perhaps that extends to parallel universes. Reddit user Great Larry Bird 33 said, I have a 10-month-old son, great kid, and is just starting to crawl and move around on his own. Tonight, before I put him to bed, he passed out on this big pillow in our living room after he'd had a bottle. I picked him up and put him in his crib in his room down the hall, then let the dog out and sat down to watch some TV before I brushed my teeth and went to bed. My dog walked down the hall to my bedroom to go to bed, and about an hour later I get up to turn the TV off and notice my son asleep facing away from me on the same pillow I picked him up from an hour before. I'm now thinking that given his skill level of walking and crawling, there is no way he was getting walking out of his crib, down the hall, and back there again. I chalked it up to me not paying attention. So I walked over, picked him up, slung him over my left shoulder, went over to the front window, shut that, and went back down the hall to go put him in bed. I opened the door to his room, turned the corner, and with the dim light from the nightlight, I noticed that he is now in his crib, rolled towards me, asleep. It took me about a second to put together what was happening. How did I have him on my shoulder and he was in bed at the same time? What felt like a millisecond later, I hear my dog kind of bark and whimper in a confused tone right behind me. Then I look to my left, bringing my arm down, and see that his stuffed animal monkey is in my arm. Now, I am as sure as anything in my life that I picked up my son and that I would have known the difference between a 25-pound kid and a 1-pound stuffed animal. Now, I've checked the carbon monoxide detectors, the windows were open, and I've only had a single beer tonight. Weirdest thing though is my big old black lab will not leave my son's room. I'm really baffled. Wow, me too. Please give me your theories, guys. Next up at number 6 now, we have the vanishing road. Have you ever seen something disappear? I don't mean actually in front of your eyes. I mean, it was there one day and the next it was just gone. Was that your poor memory? Maybe your eyes playing tricks on you? Reddit user Padjo95 has this story that might make you think it's something else. They said, I swear up and down that this actually happened. About 4 years ago, I lived in this fairly small fly speck of a town. At the time, I had lived there for about 12 years, so I knew my way around. Our house was about 1.5 miles away from the nearest neighbourhood. Our mom intentionally picked that house due to the lack of neighbours. It was tucked away on a back road with the woods surrounding it. Every now and again, I liked to take walks with my little brother, who at the time was about 13. We decided to do just that. We headed up the road and decided to try and find a new path or a new clearing that we hadn't discovered yet, and we noticed something a little shocking. Just off the road that led almost directly to the neighbourhood, there was a brand new paved road. Every road in that part of town was a gravel road, so seeing an out of place paved road was pretty unusual. We stared at it for a while and came to the conclusion that it must have been made within the last few days due to the modern but slow growth of the town. However, we had no explanation for how they did it so fast. We decided to explore it a bit. I remember as soon as we set foot on the road, the air became noticeably colder by at least 5 degrees. The road itself was a black pavement, but no dividing lines. It was surrounded by some thick red trees that resembled redwoods, but they were too short and non-native to our state in southern Arkansas. We walked on the road for about 3 miles until we decided to head back due to it getting dark. When we got off the road, we felt the temperature go back up. My brother and I agreed to explore it the next day. At roughly noon the following day, we set back out to explore this place, only to discover that the entire road was now missing. When I say missing, I mean the trees that were cleared to make it had apparently grown back with no sign of the redwood-like trees. We even began to explore the woods once more, but found no sign that it ever existed. When we asked our parents about it, they said they knew nothing about any new road work being done near us. Has anyone ever experienced anything like this? Moving on to number 5 now, we have the play. There are theories that with every moment that passes in time, an infinite amount of alternate realities are born. Sometimes people claim to see them. Dolphin, who said, I had an experience when I was a teenager that has led me to believe that I am now living in an alternate timeline. When I was a teenager, I would occasionally get 30-second or so glimpses into were always of no real use, since there would be random glimpses into in a play, and I could see the same situation starting to unfold, so I took the object in question and moved it as far away from myself as I could. See the same